I think the good news for MSPs is that a lot of cybersecurity marketing is really bad. And so, whereas in the luxury travel space, to compete with a luxury hotel or a safari company is really hard because everybody's selling something really beautiful and gorgeous, in cybersecurity, to stand out, all you've got to do is not use a padlock on the front of your brochure, and you're different from 85% of other cybersecurity companies.
You're listening to the MSP Security Playbook, the show where modern MSPs come to sharpen their strategy, streamline operations, and secure their growth. I'm your host, Jacob Hazelbaker, BDR at Heimdall Security, where we help MSPs win with unified, AI-powered cybersecurity solutions. Today's guest is Alice Violet, a marketing leader in cyber and tech, speaker, storyteller, and host of the Cyber Made Human podcast. After starting her career in luxury marketing, Alice made the leap into cybersecurity, bringing a fresh creative lens to one of the most complex and fast-moving industries out there. In this conversation, Alice shares how MSPs can communicate complexity with clarity, turn technical messaging into human storytelling, and build a brand voice that earns real trust, not just says it. It's a conversation packed with insight, creativity, and practical ideas to help you make your message as strong as your security. But before that, here's Adam Pilton, Heimdall Security Advisor, with this week's Threat Brief.
Thanks, Jacob. Imagine this. Your organization runs Oracle eBusiness Suite, EBS, fully patched, fully compliant, trusted to manage your most sensitive financial and HR data. But overnight, attackers found a way in, not through an old unpatched system, through a zero-day no one saw coming. This week, Oracle rushed to patch a severe vulnerability in EBS, a flaw that allowed attackers to gain unauthorized access to sensitive data, including payroll records, vendor information, and financial transactions. And within days of disclosure, Harvard University became the first confirmed victim. Attackers leveraged the flaw to infiltrate systems and exfiltrate sensitive data before defenders even knew what was happening. Let's take a look at what happened. The vulnerability sits in Oracle's eBusiness Suite web module. It's a remote, unauthenticated access flaw. That means attackers don't need credentials. They just send crafted HTTP requests to an exposed portal. And suddenly, they're inside. Once in, they can interact with back-end components, extract data, or even execute code. Oracle has released patches, but exploitation started before most organizations could apply them. In Harvard's case, the intrusion began with suspicious API activity tied to an Oracle endpoint. Attackers moved fast, they dumped sensitive data, established persistence, and all of it happened before security systems raised the alarm. Forensic analysis is still ongoing, but one thing's clear. This was a true zero-day. Even fully patched systems weren't safe. eBusiness Suite powers payroll, procurement, and HR operations across major institutions. That makes it a goldmine for attackers. One successful exploit gives them the keys to your financial ecosystem, and because EBS integrates with dozens of other internal systems, a compromise here can cascade fast and silently. So here's what you need to do. First, patch immediately. Oracle has now issued fixes. Don't wait for maintenance windows, apply them now. Secondly, restrict access. EBS should never be directly exposed to the internet. Keep it behind VPNs or secure gateways. And finally, assume exposure. If your EBS instance was unpatched in the past 2 weeks, run a full compromised assessment. Audit your Oracle logs. Look for unusual API calls, database access, or unexplained connections. Don't rely on vulnerability scans alone. And here's the takeaway for you. The Harvard breach is a wake-up call. 0 days against enterprise systems aren't theoretical. They're being weaponized at scale. Enterprise resource planning platforms like Oracle EBS are the nervous system of large organizations. When attackers compromise them, they gain access to everything that matters. So act fast, patch faster, and keep your defenses tuned for Oracle exploitation attempts. Stay sharp. Catch you in the next Threat Brief. Back to you, Jacob.
Alice Violet, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this conversation. You have a really interesting, diverse background. I love your content you create too. So your career journey, I think, is really fascinating from luxury marketing now to cybersecurity. So how on earth did this transition happen?
And so I started my career, as you mentioned, in luxury travel marketing, and I worked there for about 6 years for two of the biggest providers. Was sent to India, Kenya on luxury safaris and little tiny jets and things, and it was amazing. And in 2018, I moved into cyber, which sounds very, very, very different, and it was. And it was essentially because I had a clause in my contract that said I couldn't go to another competitor, I couldn't go to another travel company. So I thought I was just going to go there for 3 months and then scurry back to luxury travel. But actually, I fell in love with cybersecurity. I started working at Sophos, cybersecurity giants, and I was there in the naked security team, which is an incredible team of people. I had Anna Brading, Paul Ducklin, Mark Stockley, and they taught me so much about cybersecurity because they did it in a way that was really human, but also really fun. I used to leave work with my cheeks hurting from laughing all day with them. And it was such a contrast from luxury travel. But I also felt like there was a lot more potential there because I think that in terms of marketing, luxury travel, it's pretty easy to sell, whereas cybersecurity is a lot more of a challenge. And I felt like there was a lot more I could do in that space. So then I've stayed there ever since, launched my own business in marketing 4.5 years ago. And we specialize in emerging technology and cybersecurity now. So I work with a lot of cybersecurity brands, delivering training, workshops, talks, but we also do kind of brand business positioning, podcasting, videography, photography, anything kind of content marketing.
I love that. And I think that's something a lot of MSPs are looking for help with too, because a lot of us come from the tech side. We love computers, we love cybersecurity, anything with bits and bytes. But when it comes down to how on earth do you do marketing, let alone content creation, that's super hard. So I love that you went into that space.
Thank you. Yeah, I think a lot of people find it hugely challenging. And I'm looking forward to diving into some of the different ways today that hopefully can give you some tips on how to do that more effectively.
Yeah, I've seen some of your content online and YouTube. It's really solid. And
Thank you.
something that really stuck out about your work for me was that you've spoken in the past about the importances of communicating complexity.
Hmm.
Cybersecurity often feels complex, especially with
Yeah,
all the jargon.
yes,
So,
absolutely.
what does that mean in the context of specifically cybersecurity marketing?
So I think communicating complexity is all about, for me, putting it into context. Cybersecurity for people is a lot of new terminology and new language, especially if English isn't your first language. Sometimes there aren't other examples of words for very new concepts. And I think it can be really difficult for anyone, even if English is your first language, to understand some of the language being said, especially as we seem to love acronyms in this industry. There's an acronym for absolutely everything. Lots of companies go by acronyms. I mean, my business is called Alice Violet Creative and my podcast is Cyber Made Human. And people like to call it ABC and CMH. And I'm like, no, just use the words. And I think that removing those acronyms and some of that technical language and just putting it into context. So if you're talking about encrypting your data, all that means is keeping your phone safe or your laptop safe. I think it's just using words that are more kind of day-to-day simple language rather than the kind of technical language.
That's that's a good point because your podcast, Cyber Made Human, instead of Cyber Made Acronym, and
Yeah,
you made it
exactly.
more relatable for people. Is
Yeah,
that something
exactly.
that's interesting approach because is that something you found from working with luxury brands they do as well?
No, the thing, so I've actually given a talk before at UK Cyber Week, which was about the lessons that cybersecurity brands can take from luxury marketing. And it was purposefully kind of surprising to comprise those two industries together. But there's a lot that cybersecurity can learn from luxury. And one of them is about kind of making things very context based, but also trust based. So trust is a massive thing in both cybersecurity and luxury. The reason that you're paying a premium to go with a luxury brand is because you feel safe that you're going to be protected, your money's protected, you've got, a specific contact all the way along. And I think that that's the same in cyber with something that's quite scary, like cybersecurity, also generally quite expensive. Trusting the individuals and the humans behind the brand is really key. And also, I think being the gold standard of your industry is something that obviously luxury does. You want to be associated with it, you want to aspire to be part of it. I think that cybersecurity brands should be doing the same. You want to be the leader in your field. There's 100,000 MSPs. What makes you different? And generally, that comes down to trust, your humans, and being the best in your space.
I've never actually thought about that. I love that comparison and similarity there between the two fields because it reminds me of a conversation I was having with another MSP who really specialized in specifically dentists. And
Oh.
what they would do is they'd cold call dentist offices in their area and they'd ask them what dentist software they use because they knew that market. They had the
Hmm.
trust of them then of saying, hey, do you use this software or that one? So for MSPs that are looking to build trust and really hone in as the leader in their area, that's a good approach. Is there any general advice you have for them in kind of establishing a trust like luxury brands have done?
I think it would be thought leadership. So, a massive part of storytelling and creating compelling content in cybersecurity comes down to people. And I know that it's full of technical people who don't like to be on camera, for example. But I do think that coming out of your comfort zone and doing that is the key. So, what you often find with tech and cyber brands is that it will be a marketer that's the spokesperson or the face of the brand, and they're not the technical specialist. And I do think that's a shame when you have all these incredibly talented people that just need a bit of media training in terms of not using acronyms, speaking in plain language, putting it into context, giving a kind of metaphor of real life examples of how the technology can be applied. Once you've got those fundamentals of how to communicate, I do think it's better to come from the technical specialist. I'm based in Cheltenham and we've got GCHQ here. A lot of the companies and startups around here are people who used to work for GCHQ and national intelligence or critical national infrastructure. Having that person front and center on the stage is way more powerful than a marketing person who can just communicate better. So I do think that you can teach a technical person to communicate properly rather than try and shoehorn in technical expertise to a marketer or a creative.
That's funny you should say that because I did an earlier interview with Ross Brous, and he was the CEO of his MSP, and yet he was doing the marketing. He was the face of the company
Good.
doing the videos, and that's I think you're really onto something. That makes a lot more sense now. I hadn't
Yeah.
quite framed it that way.
And I think that's why
So
podcasts are so valuable. Like with Naked Security, we were a media team, but we would bring out people. We had something called the Lab at Sophos, which was people who'd be on the dark web all day and literally fighting crimes and ransomware. And that's who you call when you're hacked. And we sort of would let these people come out of the lab and sit on the mic and talk. And it's the first time they'd ever done any public speaking. And the conversations were way more interesting than anything I could have gleaned out of the type of work they were doing in a kind of palatable, short marketing way. And that's why podcasts and long form content, even in a short form world, is so valuable for tech and cyber brands.
that's the kind of stuff I find myself watching as well. So that
Yeah,
makes sense now.
definitely.
So when MSPs begin this journey, what's one common mistake MSPs make when trying to explain really technical solutions to clients who often might not be that technical?
The problem that I see is that they are too kind of under the hood and they're telling you all about how it works. So I do a lot of video editing, for example, and if I was to sit with a client and get out Adobe Premiere Pro and start telling you all the layers of how I correct the audio and the color correction, and then when I add on an animation, they'd be like, I don't care. All I want to know is that you can make a gorgeous 2 minute video that can convert leads or help people understand my brand. And I think I see with cyber companies that you'll get a technical specialist getting out the software and showing you how it was built or a large language model or whatever it is. And it's too much information. You need to be much more solution driven and outcome driven. And it all needs to be about what does the person sitting in front of me want? Is it an investor? Is it an end user? Is it a fellow techie? What's the main thing that they want? And just give them that bit. They don't want to sit through an hour long, look how technical and complicated it is.
Yeah, that one hit home for me. I I come from the tech side, and that's been a hard lesson to learn. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
but I want to talk about the cool thing. I got to
Yeah,
focus
I
on what they're.
know.
It's hard. It's real hard. And so that reminds me then for it seems like many MSPs heavily focus, as you said, on tech, but struggle with the storytelling.
Mhm.
That's the part I love is the storytelling these days. So, what advice do you give teams who say, "Ah, we're just not a creative brand"?
So, in terms of you not being a creative brand, you can still visually tell a story based on who your audience is. So, the example you gave earlier about someone who specializes in dentist surgeries, there's no reason why they can't use a lot of kind of health focused imagery. They could film their videos, for example, in a kind of hospital environment. So I have recently completed a 6-part documentary series with CyNAM, which means Cyber Cheltenham, and it was all about securing the future of technology. And we very easily could have just sat in an office with someone talking to camera about agritech, but we didn't. We went to farms and we showed the presenter, which was just the head of CyNAM, actually it was the marketing person from CyNAM, just stroking a cow and talking to someone who specialized in agritech about how robots had created efficiency and saved money on the farm. And I think just putting us in context made such a difference. And we also did an episode on space tech. So they put lab coats on and walked around some robots. And then we did one on digital twins. So we went to an airport to talk about how you could twin an aeroplane and use that to see how much fuel was left and things like that. We didn't need to go into context, but it just made the video more beautiful and more interesting. And so I do think that you can take quite a simple concept and just make it more beautiful by putting it into the context of your end user rather than just being in an office, for example. And I think it's the same with podcasting. I'm very against the foam wall black podcast studio. I've filmed my podcast in private members clubs, on stages, in all kinds of gorgeous locations, but I would never do it in a black studio because it removes any kind of visual context of the show. And I just think something that people get wrong is missing the kind of softer visual touches to tell a story, not just through what you're saying.
That okay, so that gives me an idea. Then it seems like being memorable is at least as important as letting people see your content. In this case, instead of a blank office where most people record their videos, you got out there and filmed with a literal living cow.
Yeah.
Like people would remember that, I would imagine.
Exactly. They did remember that. And it also made it a lot more fun to record because, again, these are people who aren't used to being on camera. It's not like we had actors and presenters. These were just technical specialists from the labs or from the CyNAM team. But putting them on the farm in welly boots or lab coats suddenly just made the conversation go in a very different direction than if they're sitting stiffly on a sofa. And I think that in tech and cyber, that's something that can really help, get people out of their comfort zone and make more interesting content.
Who knows? Maybe next year you'll see me in a server room or
Yeah, exactly.
surrounded by cables.
Why not? Why not?
It'd be fun. I don't know if I'd pet a cow. I live in Florida, but we'll see.
A crocodile.
Yeah, the crocodile's more likely. My final episode. So I'm really curious then, how can MSPs develop a consistent, I think that's the hard part, consistent and authentic brand voice in an industry that's really, really technical?
So I think the good news for MSPs is that a lot of cybersecurity marketing is really bad. And so whereas in the luxury travel space, to compete with a luxury hotel or a safari company is really hard because everybody's selling something really beautiful and gorgeous. In cybersecurity, it's, to stand out, all you've got to do is not use a padlock on the front of your brochure and you're different from 85% of other cybersecurity companies. So I think just doing things slightly differently, being a bit more creative. I was working with a company recently and we were doing a white paper, which was a deep dive. So on the cover of it, we had like water and it was all just a bit more kind of water themed. And I think that could have easily just been a blue boring brochure with the words on the front, but just using imagery that evokes something a bit more interesting, looks gorgeous on your desk, so you want to keep it. In terms of consistent and authentic, it would be looking at the things that are specific to you as a brand. So is there a person that worked for you that used to work in intelligence or open source intelligence, social engineering? Have you partnered or released some specific white paper? And how can you really make that specific to the people in your organization or what's happening currently in the news? Another great thing is to become a thought leader by looking at what's happening in the news and being the first to react to it. So that when big things happen, like what happened with Microsoft and CrowdStrike earlier this year, people are actually looking for you to see what you say versus you sort of trying to get anyone to listen to you. You're already established as a voice in that space. So when things happen, you're thinking, I wonder what Jacob thinks.
That's a great idea because that really hits on the consistent side as well as authentic because you're kind of like a source of trusted news for them.
Yeah.
One of our earlier guests, Dave Sobel, he does that, and that resonates. I think you guys are right about that because it's just, it's hard to keep on top of the news, for example. It's hard to know what you even need to look in Google today?
So the other thing with authenticity is also not being afraid to disagree. I think that having an opinion, a lot of corporate companies or people who work for large companies might be scared to have an opinion, but it is really important and it can actually still be positive. So recently there was a CISO that I follow on LinkedIn talking about some of the big horrible news stories that have happened. And his whole angle was actually about mental health and thinking about your CISO when they have gone through an attack, when they have spent a lot of money on it. You know, people are being breached every day and being targeted thousands of times a day. If something happens, it doesn't necessarily mean they did anything wrong. It just means that they're against really sophisticated targeted attacks. And as a cyber team, thinking about your mental health of your team after that's happened, that's quite a different approach to cybersecurity marketing and just a different opinion that stands out against everyone else saying, you should buy this now, otherwise this will happen to you as well.
I fully agree, and it touches back to the cyber made human. You're adding a human element back into the ones and zeros, if you will, because
Yeah,
I feel that a lot in our field because I truly believe at the bottom of my heart that anything can be hacked. You just got to
yeah,
find one way to
absolutely.
do it.
There's a scam for everybody.
Yep. So I love that you're tying your work back with these really technical topics back to the human element, back to the person behind the keyboard. I think that's real important, especially in today's age of automation and AI and everything. Um,
Definitely.
and so another thing you do, you mentioned earlier, I think that really resonates with me is that in a world that feels like it's obsessed with short form content, especially, why do you believe long form still matters, especially in tech and cyber?
So I would say in cybersecurity and emerging technology, because it's quite a complex industry, it does need space to breathe. Even if you've worked in cybersecurity for 30 years, there's always evolving technology and there's always things that are changing. And so people who, if you're talking to end users who are non-techies, to expect them to stay up to date on this stuff is not realistic, to be honest. Also, I feel like a lot of platforms might be designed for short form content, but that doesn't mean that your audience still wants to see that all the time. I think sometimes when we look at TikTok or Instagram and you look at the whole data set and you'll say like 90% of videos are less than a minute, then you think I must make all my content less than a minute. Whereas if you actually looked at the UK and people over 55 who are earning X amount, who are leaders of companies, they might actually consume content that is over 4 minutes long, and that might be their top referrer for podcast content that then is then an hour long on a different platform, and they might just be using it for discovery. So it's about looking at the data more intricately to actually see how does that apply to my company and my demographic, not kind of just seeing the main analytics and rolling with that.
That's really interesting because I never ever thought to consider what might be the preference in long form versus short form of my specific target audience, like who I really want to be listening to this. That's that's really eye-opening because honestly, yeah, I feel like a lot of decision makers, they're probably wanting a more in-depth, a more fulfilled kind of long form content that outlays it more in details. Whereas maybe someone just passing by who's not real interested in a topic might just watch a 30-second video and be done for the day. And where do you see the biggest opportunities for creative storytelling in cyber and managed service providers, MSP marketing over the next roughly few years?
I would say it's all about putting things into context. So it's about looking at who your target audience is and speaking their language, but also remove any ounce of scaremongering. Cybersecurity is no longer something that just has to be bolted on the side of your company. It's intrinsic to everything, and all of your leadership team definitely, but ideally everybody in the company needs to know about it. It's like marketing and sales. It's part of the whole ecosystem of the business. And so really understanding business as a whole and presenting it as more of an opportunity versus just something you've got to spend money on or you'll lose a load of money is, I think, how you can reframe this conversation. I think earlier this year there was in the UK a hack. I think it was Marks and Spencer's was hacked, and I think it might have even been Next that took 10% of their company during the time that the site was down, which is massive. And Next and Marks and Spencer's you wouldn't even necessarily see as competitors of each other. And so framing it as this is an opportunity for you to dominate your market, not just to keep yourself safe, is a completely different narrative. And that might make the CEO ears prick up, and then you might get more investment into your cyber team or into managed service providers or whatever it is, because they suddenly see it as an opportunity, not just a cost.
I love that way of reframing because, yeah, that's a big thing in cybersecurity. You're very correct there. um, with the rise of AI tools like generative AI for content and design, how do you see that changing cyber brands and how they communicate?
Well, I'm hoping that it might make people more imaginative. My worry is that it's actually just going to reinforce a lot of the stereotypes that we've seen for years in the industry. So that use of padlocks, now it's just animated and flies off the screen. I think that really we need to be getting creative people to be engaging their brains, not just kind of allowing it to make art quicker or easier. So I do actually see it could become negative, and it could be that a lot of content looks the same. I've seen a lot of cyber companies, sadly, actually inventing teams on their website. So they'll build a team page, even if it's just a solo founder with some consultants.
Oh,
And that is the worst thing you can do, in my opinion, because in a trust-based industry that's all about, keeping you safe and probably building a long-term relationship with each of your clients, having a fake team on your website just because you could have an AI made it is, I think, actually having quite an amateur website, but being realistic is better. So I think just use AI sparingly and honestly, and really be authentic, and don't get tempted to use it to make yourself appear something that you're not. And don't look at 10 cybersecurity companies and just become another version of them. Look at other industries, look at luxury travel, look at your core demographics industry, and get inspiration from other places. Don't just kind of become your own large language model, repeating everything the industry is already doing.
you're absolutely right. Every time I type in cyber into any kind of AI image generation, it makes the padlock.
It makes a padlock, a neon red padlock.
It really does.
It really
I
does.
love that advice then. It sounds like for MSPs using AI for content generation, you might recommend them to use other words besides cyber or cybersecurity for their prompts then.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Make it context based. So, yeah, if you were wanting to find, so for example, I've ever done content that's about keeping safe in a coffee shop, for example, and in the past, companies or still would use a picture of a laptop with a floating neon padlock on top of it. Whereas I would rather see someone in a coffee shop enjoying a gorgeous coffee, a really beautifully aesthetic image, and it's more about like make sure you lock your screen when you get up from your desk, or just talking about it in a more beautiful way. Similarly with phishing content, even though this might sound counterintuitive because it's so abstract, I've ever used beautiful kind of tropical under the sea imagery to talk about fishing rather than an email with, scam written in red across it. I just think it's about being more imaginative and creative with the visual storytelling. Yeah.
I agree. And where can our listeners connect with you and learn more about Cyber Made Human?
So please subscribe to Cyber Made Human on Spotify and YouTube. We've got a Halloween special going live this week, actually, which we actually dive into the biggest horror stories of 2025 so far with someone who was former CrowdStrike. So we've got some interesting intel there. Goes live every week. We also just did a live episode, and the next one after that is about the empathy algorithm. So using AI as your therapist and the risks involved there. So that's quite an interesting episode. And then if you're interested in my marketing services, then check out Alice Violet Creative, or add me on
Fan-
LinkedIn, Alice Violet.
Oh, fantastic. And my last question for you actually comes from an MSP. They wanted
Okay.
to ask you, in such a crowded cybersecurity space, every MSP claims to be trusted or secure. How do we actually stand out and build real trust through cyber security marketing, not just saying it?
So I think it's show, don't tell. You don't need to use the word trusted constantly. You have to demonstrate that through the work that you're actually doing. So is it based on the experience that your employees have? Is it based on some of the different backgrounds they have? I think I met someone recently who's a quantum physicist who used to be, well, studied philosophy. And that's really interesting. That's totally different. And suddenly I'm interested and want to know what they have to say about the kind of quantum advancements that are happening. So I think lean into your people and their human stories and what makes you different in the real world, not just using empty words like trust.
Fantastic. Alice Violet, thank you so much for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you for
I
having
think our
me.
listeners did. You're very welcome. Have a great day.
And you, thank you.
This was a really fun conversation with Alice Violet of Cyber Made Human podcast. And I love the advice she gave for MSPs She has a really interesting background in luxury brand marketing, which I think is super useful for MSPs who really want to stand out and also build trust for the clients. So one of the things she said that kind of stuck with me was how she described how do you communicate complex topics in an understandable way. As she pointed out, a lot of MSPs, your clients, your customers, might not be the most technical in cybersecurity. They might know their field extremely well. They might be a dentist office. They might be lawyers, but cyber might not be their thing. So how then do you demonstrate your value, what you're providing to your client in a way in which they connect with and understand? So one thing she pointed out was just don't dive down that acronym rabbit hole. You don't want to just communicate in terms that you get excited about, features, things your products and services can do, but instead communicate to why it is they're there. Why are they meeting with you today? Is it the dentist office wants to protect their client data, perhaps? Dive into that. Does the lawyer office perhaps want to protect their own people they're representing in court cases from having their case compromised or threatened by a cybersecurity threat? So it's really important, I think, to put context into it and relate it in a relatable way, be it storytelling or something that they can relate to from their own experience in life. The other thing I thought was interesting was she described a lot of luxury brand marketing and tech companies as well. A lot of what they do with their customers is they communicate trust, but they don't just say it with words. They communicate it more through demonstrating what it is they've done, demonstrating who they truly are. So, for example, she stated that instead of having, if you're one person, MSP, instead of showing, oh, here is my imaginary team of AI people, you instead say, okay, this is who I really am. I'm one person. I'm working hard for you. This is what I provide. And here are some of my customers who've been real satisfied with it in the past. So demonstrate your trust. Show, don't just tell, especially in the age of AI, generative AI. Don't do what every other cybersecurity company is doing, what every other MSP is doing in your marketing. As she pointed out, you'll see that padlock with little bits and bytes and ones and zeros inside of it almost every single time you type in the word cyber into generative AI. So instead of doing what every other company is doing, you want to be memorable. You want to stand out. You want to be out there in the field with, for example, in her case, recording with the actual literal living cow. People will remember that. Maybe for an MSP, then you can be at a dentist office. You can be at a lawyer's office, showing that you connect with the exact people who you would love to have be your clients next week, next month. So I think that's super important, especially in a day and age in which MSPs are really beginning to dive into creating content online. You got to be memorable. You got to stand out. You got to do something that's a little bit different than what every other MSP is doing. So I really enjoyed today's conversation with Alice, and I hope you did as well. And thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of the MSP Security Playbook. That's a wrap on this episode of MSP Security Playbook. Thanks for spending part of your day with us. If you found today's insights helpful, be sure to follow the show on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. It helps other MSPs find the playbook and level up their security game. Got a question you want us to tackle in the MSP Hot Seat? Or a topic you'd like to hear more about? Drop us a line. We'd love to hear from you. Until next time, stay sharp, stay secure, and keep building the future of your MSP business.